to order the planning board meeting for tonight. We're meeting with the ZBA. You want to call your meeting to order, Terry?
Sure. We'll call the joint meeting of July 31st with the planning board to order.
Okay, the only thing on our agenda tonight is planning board and ZBA discussion of the recommended or changes with the accessory apartment bylaw. And Pat actually sat in on all the meetings, so I'm going to have her take it from here, because she was
Yeah.
present and listened to all the things. And
I'd hope there'd be a couple of others, though.
Bob Dugan couldn't make it tonight, but he did submit the email
No, I
of
saw
his
that.
issues.
And our Bob couldn't make it. We do have a couple of other people here who can pull me up short if I misstate things, I think. Okay?
okay.
I don't know whether you all would agree or not, but the way I went over this with the planning board is instead of doing the red line, I took the totally corrected or proposed corrected copy or the new copy. And I went through and said, this remains the same as what it was, this has changed, and this is how it has changed and why. That may not be how you find it easier, but that's the way it made sense to me when I went over the red line and then went to the completed copy. So if you find it confusing, well, then you can confuse me by going to the red line. The purpose remains absolutely the same as under the current bylaw. There's not a change in that at all. Under definitions, the definition of accessory apartment is the same, no change. So let's go down to requirements. 3A is the same. Only one accessory apartment shall be allowed per lot. 3B is new. It was felt that instead of holding out really false hope to people, we should limit the size, the smallest size of a lot that could potentially be on. So we decided that it should be stated the lot size shall be no less than 7,500 square feet. It is also intended that that's a starting point, and just because we limit it to 7,500 square feet, that does not mean that if you have 7,500 square feet, you can actually have an accessory apartment. It may be the shape of the lot, it may be any number of things that would prevent you from having that. And when we discussed that, Rod, our building commissioner, Rod Palmer, said that people potentially should start with him because he would cover so many of the problems that might come up if you're looking to build an accessory, whether it's in your home or in an accessory building.
And I think that's a good idea, because the building code issues are so much more than, and people don't understand, and that's where they need to start.
Yeah, and I'm stating this because hopefully we have a nice listening audience tonight, and they will hear that. Start with Rod Palmer if you want to do an accessory apartment. Do not assume because it says 7,500 square feet, you can have one.
Would it be appropriate to just add that comment in?
Not in the bylaw.
Okay, all right.
No, definitely not.
But
Go ahead.
we talked about, when we're done with this, that we're going to make a pamphlet or a booklet and have a guide
Oh, okay.
or
all right.
something, or maybe even a video or something on
As you
how
all
to.
know.
So that, because that's will answer a lot of questions.
Okay, 3C is absolutely the same. 3D, it's the same, but it's stated more clearly. So there can be no mistake, we hope. There can always be mistakes, but we changed that first sentence to 2 sentences so that it now reads, either the principal dwelling or accessory apartment may be rented, but not both. That makes it very clear. The owner-occupied dwelling cannot be rented while the owner is absent. The original sentence in the bylaw we currently operate under could be construed, it was very confusing, so there could be a number of constructions on that and confusion. The final two sentences are the same. It was just that first sentence that was changed. 3E, the change here is it calls out how to measure. So you'll see that after whichever is less, comma, and then that last phrase is new, as measured using the exterior side of the outside wall. Because there were multiple different ways of being able to measure the square footage. And unless it was called out in the bylaw, we strongly believed that anybody could be correct. You'd be constantly arguing as to what the correct definition is as to square footage. Suri?
Is that strictly for detached or those apartments that are created within an existing footprint?
Also
How do you-
within,
Okay.
anything is by the outside measurement.
Okay,
Because we looked into different forms of the definitions of how you measure the square footage. Well, some didn't count a bathroom because you can't live in a bathroom. Some didn't count a closet because guess what? You can't. Hallways weren't counted.
right.
So whose definition of how you measure the square footage? This takes away any kind of second guessing. It's the outside dimensions.
Can we back up just, I don't even have the red line or what you're reading from, but all is in my copy. When the accessory apartment is approved, then the special permit will designate what's the principal and what's the accessory, so the person can't change back and forth, they'd have to come back. and
We
give
can
them-
never change back and forth, because
Right.
one's gonna be 40% of the other, so you could never switch them back and forth.
No, but the owner does have the opportunity to either reside
He
in the
can-
That's what I meant,
accessory.
yeah.
They can always do
They
that.
can always do that.
That's always an
Oh,
option.
okay, okay,
That's the whole purpose of it. It allows somebody to age in place.
Right.
okay.
You know, to start off renting out the small one and then moving into the other one that's the whole idea, that someone could stay in their house for an extra 10 years with that ability.
Okay, right.
And Paul mentioned that I should mention too, that Rod Palmer supports that exterior wall measurement too, as being the least questionable way of measuring. So then we go on to 3F. And what is new there, and this actually came out of our planning board meeting, so you might want to add this in, and it seems advisable to do these changes. The footprint of a new detached structure. So you put the word new in there. Detached accessory, then instead of structure, crossed it out and said dwelling unit. Because this is actually a dwelling unit we're talking about.
Right.
So within a
That's-
barn or something like that.
So the
you
barn
don't
could be a
count the
lot
whole
bigger,
thing.
but the dwelling unit's gonna be unclear.
Understandable.
That's,
That's
I forgot we made, I got that.
Well, that's
Okay.
why I went to this one instead of the red line, because that wouldn't have been caught in the red line.
Right.
This was from our last meeting when we went over this.
So somebody could have a 1,000-square-foot barn on their property. It could be bigger than their home,
Right.
on the footprint of the home, but they could still put an
Which
accessory
we've
apartment.
approved two of those that
Right.
were before you and before this
Mm-hmm.
board.
That's important, because those buildings are existing.
Right.
So I would ask, is there any question from the ZBA? The planning board thought this would be a good change. Does anybody from the ZBA have any concerns about that change in the language?
About the new dwelling unit exceeding?
Yes, well, no, under
you read
F,
it
the
again?
footprint of a new, add the word new, detached accessory, cross out structure, and put in dwelling unit instead. Then there can be no question that we're talking about a dwelling unit, and we're talking about a new dwelling unit.
I think the proposed language is fine.
Okay. Then we go to G through J. This was restated by our new fellow with the Board of Health.
Scott
Pardon?
McDermott again?
Scott
Yeah,
McGann.
Scott McGann. But I wanted to point out he was new, so he's got fresh eyes to look at this. And he said, he thought it really should be clarified more by splitting it apart. And we all on the committee agreed. So essentially, it's identical to what was covered in the original D through F. but it restates it and makes it clearer.
And that's the way the old bylaw was, only if you added where the other things counted.
So I think we're okay. Sari, you've had a good chance to look at that. And
Right.
you don't have a problem with
Not at
that
all.
restatement?
Not at all.
Okay. J, let's see, was that the same?
Yeah, those are those paragraphs that Scott sort of reworded and split them up
Right.
into, from one very long sentence or a couple sentences into those periods.
Correct. And that probably doesn't really show very well on the red line
Is
as
that
to what went
HB?
on. Pardon?
That's HB? H, A, and B? One, you connect to the sewer, two, you didn't approve of that.
I'm sorry, it's under J,
Oh, that's under J now, okay.
and it's the same except that the lettering that we're
Okay.
referring to has changed there, so it is correct. So that is the same as the prior. Under design standards.
Could we back up?
Yes,
I know we discussed it, and as Scott had said, right now, we don't have an enhanced nitrogen standard on the books as defined by the Board of Health, although I'm sure they're capable of coming up with one. This puts the Board of Health in a predicament to require enhanced nitrogen system before there may be a requirement, probably recommended by the Water Quality Committee, to put in an advanced nitrogen system. This could be bad for, just like you wouldn't want, if you wouldn't want someone to put in a nitrogen system and then find out they're gonna tie into the sewer, or put in a nitrogen system that doesn't meet the standards to meet water quality. I don't see, I agree the Board of Health has to approve it. I don't see the benefit within here of saying an enhanced nitrogen system. The overlay district and other places could require expansions, whatever, to meet stricter nitrogen standards. We're not asking for, this is not asking for 4 or 5 bedrooms. These are gonna be modest expansions. I forget what one person is, but it's measurable but hardly detectable. So and I know this has been in for a while, so I don't see the need for enhanced nitrogen. I would think we could just say an on-site system, cut out with enhanced and just approved by the Board of Health.
Board of Health.
That way, if there's strong testimony that an enhanced nitrogen system is needed, or the Water Quality Committee is about ready to approve something, even though it hasn't gone in front of town meeting, they could say that that nitrogen system has to meet A, B, or C, whatever it is. It might be 12, more than likely it will be 12. Probably not gonna be 19, it could even be lower, depending on the standard.
I understand what you're saying, Jerry, but remember, G is an existing dwelling in excess of 4 bedrooms may convert 2 of the existing bedrooms into 1 accessory unit. So we've
Yes.
not only got more than the 4 bedrooms that are allowed, but we're allowing them to convert 2 of those into another unit, which definitely will mean you're going to have more people using the system.
You could, depending if it's a
Well, I
one
shouldn't say
person.
definitely, but,
But the point is, we're requiring a standard that's not defined yet. If we knew what that standard was, and maybe by town meeting, we would know it, or maybe when they approve the new overlay district, more than likely, those are gonna have advanced nitrogen systems in it for any expansions. Granted, it's increasing nitrogen, but, this is an accessory apartment, it's to make sure people can age in place, probably at a reasonable cost. An enhanced nitrogen system, maybe with the new George Helfelder system, might be 10 or 15,000, it could be 20,000. I don't know.
right.
So, that's why I don't see the need to specify enhanced. Let the Board of Health make that decision based on the testimony they receive, because they have to approve the system.
With everybody's permission, I would like to have Diane comment and Virginia comment on this, if they're both willing to do so. And you'll have to come up to the microphone. Sorry to make you.
That's all right. Virginia Valiela, Precinct 5, I'm also a member of the Water Quality Management Committee. I think in terms of process, in your review tonight, that where a suggestion is made for a change from what has been basically a consensus document that is presented to you tonight, that should be brought back to the committee for discussion, rather than me sort of shooting from the hip tonight as to whether I think you should take out the words enhanced. I think that the group that has worked on these modifications to the bylaw has worked extremely well. It's been well represented from all of the affected parties. And I just think that we should prepare a thoughtful answer to, in this case, a suggestion that the word enhanced be deleted. So I'm not going to give an opinion one way or the other at this point.
Okay, thank you for that comment, Virginia.
Diana Malloy from the Board of Health. And there has been some discussion amongst that group. I think it was, again, challenging because there aren't any set standards yet, even amongst our own board. We're still looking for clarity and some support with the Water Quality Management Committee to kind of define what that needs to be and what it should be going forward. And having said, where we are today might be totally different 2 years from now. So I think that I'll give you just my personal opinion, and being in the group, I found it difficult to address 2 different or 3 different issues all in one thing. So I was feeling that it might be something that we want to tackle separately if we wanted to set those standards. And again, I think the board does try to look at all of, certainly very thoughtful anytime we're approving any systems. But as we stand today, we do not have great data as far as the innovative and alternative systems, as far as what is going to work for the long haul. So I know George is doing a lot of work on that, and we're hoping to get some clarity as we move forward. But as we stand here today, we don't have a lot of clarity, if that makes any sense.
Okay, so you're coming down and we don't know at this point. Would you be, because you don't know yet, would you be in line with Jerry, do you think, flying, off the cuff here, to take out enhanced nitrogen and leave it totally up to the Board of Health to make a determination based upon whatever the current knowledge is?
I think so. I mean, I don't know that if we were to look at a different bylaw that was dealing with coastal overlay, that might be a place to put that with X number of bedrooms or X number of whatever. I think this is kind of, I found it as we're in the working group, and I know it's Virginia and I shared my opinion.
Mm-hmm.
I found it difficult to kind of mix and mingle those things at the same time. That if we were going to address it, would we address it for anybody in the coastal overlay districts versus just the accessory apartments is kind of where I was coming from. That if it needs to be done, should we look at any new construction or any new things like that versus just this one thing. So it's only an opinion, and again, there's been lots of discussion, and I know what the intent is and what everyone's trying to do. Just on a personal note, I found it hard to mix and match those 2 things together.
Okay, and Sari, you had a comment.
When you guys were first ramping up on this, I sent everybody that was in this committee a copy of the old bylaw, and number 4 specifically addressed this, and it worked for years and years and years. And it depended, of course, you're going to have to change the language with the minimum lot and the whole bit, but if they were in a coastal pond or a water resource protection overlay district, and they added a bedroom, and the lot was a certain size, they had to do alternative. And I got an opinion from Frank Duffy that it was the Board of Health's determination as to what system that would be. Whether the bylaw can say alternative, and we can make them do an alternative. However, with the type of alternative would be strictly up to the Board of Health and the practices that they have. And I think that's their expertise. I don't think it's, no offense, I don't think it's the planning board's expertise, and it's definitely not the ZBA's, which is why I got an opinion from Frank Duffy on that. So maybe you might want to read that number 4 in the old bylaw, 24023I and 24038I, that was in existence prior to this change. It might help give a little bit of clarity. And maybe, I did send it to everybody that is on that committee. Just,
I don't know if I got
John
it.
had a comment.
I have a question, please.
you weren't on the committee.
So, I'm reading number G. It says, "An existing dwelling in excess of 4 bedrooms may convert 2 of the existing bedrooms into 1 accessory unit." And then in number J, it says, "Properties in the Coastal Pond Overlay District that want to increase beyond the density outlined in G can only do so provided that." So how many, it says in excess of 4 bedrooms, does that mean it has to have 5 bedrooms or more?
Yes.
So if you have a 5-bedroom house and you want to increase, you want to convert, so it has to have at least 5 bedrooms, not 4 bedrooms.
Oh.
Has to be in excess of 4 bedrooms.
That's the way it reads, yes.
Okay,
The point is that there are any number of houses that might have more than the 4 bedrooms that would be allowed in that district. And we're not gonna make people tear out bedrooms to have an accessory apartment.
but it has to be at least 5 bedrooms in the, to meet what we're talking about here.
It's an example, is it not, that if you have 5 bedrooms,
Yes.
you can convert.
Right.
If you have 3 bedrooms, you can convert, but if you have to add one, and if you're in a coastal pond, and I hope the Water Resource District is in your bylaw as well as the Coastal Overlay District, is it not? Is it just the Coastal Pond
It
Overlay
mentions both.
District?
It does.
It should say Water Resource as well.
I do believe it
In,
does.
in I.
Yeah, in I,
Okay,
subject to the provisions of the Water Resource Protection or Coastal Pond
Okay.
Overlay Districts.
You just mentioned the coastal pond, so I was a little, I don't have it in front of me, I apologize.
Well, in there, the total number of bedrooms shall not exceed 1 per 10,000 square feet of lot area. Properties that pre-exist with a density greater than 1 bedroom per 10,000 square feet in a coastal pond overlay district can maintain their existing bedroom count, but cannot increase. So G and I
appreciate it.
G and I feedback on each other, I guess you could say.
Okay.
I know when we worked on this for a long time, I always planned or understood that we were gonna have the zoning issues, the building code issues are the building code issues, and the Board of Health issues are the Board of Health issues. So I agree with Jerry, that it needs to be approved by the Board of Health. And I think for us to start defining that is not necessary, because they're gonna keep changing. Hopefully, we'll have new systems come out, things could change.
Hopefully, we'll have a standard
Yeah.
within a couple of years, so
Or
that
there could-
everybody will know what it
Or there
is.
are, but there could be a technology that comes next year that's better, and you want to change it right away.
I got a
If
bridge
we
to
don't want to
come
go to 2/3 bylaw, you guys should just do it. That's my
Well,
opinion.
I like Virginia's idea that maybe the board, the subcommittee may want to
Bring
get
it back
together.
to the subcommittee.
I mean, I'd like to be
Or the building.
invited. to
Sounds
that.
like there's a lot of interest in discussing this further, so let's,
Yeah.
And
I
could I
think
be
the-
invited?
I
Since
think the
I'm-
important thing is to let it be the discretion of the Board of Health, whose expertise.
I think
Rules
it's
it.
just leave it with the Board of Health, is my own opinion.
I mean, you can put that language in, that if you are in the coastal pond water resource, but the type and everything.
Yeah, It still has to be approved by the Board of Health.
Right, exactly. And that's the opinion I did receive from Frank Duffy. This was quite a few years ago, maybe 7 or 8 years ago.
Diane?
I think, you know, new to the accessory apartment, when we all first came together, trying to identify what were some of the things that were holding things up, issues that we needed to all work together on to resolve. I think one of the things we talked about was the fact that people weren't able to meet these bylaw standards and they were a little confusing, et cetera. So in looking at IA systems, the costs, if we're trying to encourage this, not having a standard at this time, to ask someone to incur the costs when we're trying to encourage it and don't have the standard yet, I found it a little difficult to kind of figure that, if that makes any sense.
And I'm going to throw my 2 cents in on this too. An enhanced nitrogen system, if you're going to be required to replace your septic system just to get an accessory apartment, it becomes prohibitively expensive to do so. So we're defeating the intent of this bylaw, which is to get more, even though we are not keying it to the word affordable housing, to get more alternative housing to meet greater needs.
The other thing that I heard when I first came into this group was the issue that we had with the regulation that requires the split tank or 2 tanks. And what, as a group, we worked to kind of move beyond that, to come up with a solution for where they're at now. If they were to replace their system or had to replace their system, then they'd go with the 2 tank. But we're trying not to make people do that by putting in, I think it's some sort of a baffle. Yeah, thank you.
That's all I know, it's about.
Yeah, exactly, which is
Dirty to
much more
clean.
cost effective if we're trying to promote being able to do this. So that's where we were asked to come in, because that was a holdup, is my understanding, is people were having a hard time with that. So I felt like we got beyond that, and that's a great thing, that we came up with a solution. And again, trying not to add the cost at this point where we don't have a specific standard. And it is gonna be better, and it is gonna, there's newer systems coming out, and we're hearing about all of the good stuff that's going on.
So if I can summarize, what I'm hearing here tonight is that Cerise suggests we read the old number 4 to look at this.
And it was strictly an increase of a bedroom in a coastal pond overlay.
But she suggests that we do this. And Virginia says we really should bring this whole issue back to the temporary working group. But what I really am hearing is that it very possibly should read an on-site septic system approved by the Board of Health. And so remove with enhanced nitrogen removal. Is that pretty well the consensus that I've heard from the comments here? Okay, so I'm going to put a bracket around that and say omit with a question mark to bring up before the working group. Okay. Now we go to design standards.
Pat,
Yes.
can I just wordsmith something, because it's
Sure.
driving me a little batty? Okay. Under J, properties in a coastal pond overlay district that want. I've never known a property that can want anything. So I would just suggest owners of properties in a coastal,
Yeah.
I mean, it just,
Thank you.
sorry about that, but those things just make me,
Much better. Thank you.
thank you.
Okay, so design standards. Here again, it's all the same, except you go down to B, and we added constructed as a detached accessory structure. Because that's what we're talking about here, so we wanted to make it as clear as possible. So it now reads, the architectural effect as the result of the accessory apartment being constructed as a detached accessory structure shall be that of a, we changed garage or barn to just the word structure, because then we are limiting what those accessory buildings might be that are already there. I can't remember who it was who said, you might have a carriage house. And it's on the property, it was Diane, wasn't it?
I want one.
So,
And I'm the one that originally put in the barn or garage, just because there was more of them. I
Right.
wasn't really being picky, I just said, well, there's a lot of those. That's
Right.
why I threw that language in there.
but you may have substantial sheds that people have too, workspaces. So we're limiting it too much by saying garage or barn. And I think, I'm seeing a lot of head nodding yes and no, Is that, so we're on board with that?
With regard to design standards as a whole, I think we can all agree it's a subjective standard. Is it possible to come up with some sort of guidelines, maybe in that pamphlet that Jim proposed or the video, I think that would help the general public a lot. You know, the planning board, I think you generally know what you're looking for because you're, you know, you deal with design review and, you know, the planning board, along with the ZBA, we both have expertise in that field, but I think there might be a disconnect with the general public.
We agree with that. What the end product was to have been, that was down at the very bottom line of this whole agenda, if you will, for this temporary working group, is that once we are totally on board with this, what we want to do is put something together that can be on the town website, so it's accessible that way, and like so many of these things that are down in the building department, a little pamphlet that gives you the guidelines. But it's sort of premature to put that together now, because then we'll be throwing it out and putting another one in. And I could suggest that we might wait for that until it is approved by town meeting, although there's not really a lot of substantial change in here. But I'd like to be as accurate as we could be. Jerry?
Would it be inconsistent to put in parentheses when you say structure, such as garage, barn, cottage? Or,
No, we don't want to do that.
Okay, all right.
Maybe
Too many
Because
words.
that again limits it.
In the pamphlet, it could,
Yeah, we
Okay.
could do that in the pamphlet.
such as.
And we could also in the
Okay.
pamphlet have, say, pictures of what might be an acceptable.
But the whole thing is the board, whoever's doing the decision-making, it has to have the architectural effect of a
Right.
single family. That is the overriding thing, and it just
That's true,
can't look. When we went around town and talked to people about this bylaw, everyone said, we don't want this to turn into a duplex, okay? We're not, you can't make that look, and it has to have the architectural effect of a single-family home. Or, you know, the look of the property, so it has to be accessory. That was an overwhelming comment that we got when we were out doing the field work, talking to all the people that were influenced that. So that I think is the most important part of this.
Yeah. Okay, so we go to C now, 4C. It's almost the same. Again, we threw a few words in here to make it a little bit clearer. Parking for the accessory apartment shall be provided on-site, added to it. Unquestionable what we mean by that,
Period.
period.
Right.
Okay? Because as soon as you get in a manner that is compatible with the surrounding neighborhood, well, what is that? How far is the neighborhood? So if we just limit it to parking has to be on-site, then there's no question there. If you don't have enough room for what you're doing on-site, you
Can't do
shouldn't
it.
have it.
Does that include private roads where part of that private road might be the site of the home? I know, I'm just.
They own the road, right?
Yeah, the homeowner owns the road.
Or
on
an
private roads.
association.
Or an
So you've got to
association.
be careful. I
Yeah.
agree with on-site,
I think on-site's the safest way
most
to do it.
definitely.
Okay.
So we cross out the rest of it, and it ends with the word on-site.
Site.
Okay? So that looks like everybody's in agreement with that change. We go to procedures. A is the same. I'm gonna leave the note alone right now. B, we added detached. Accessory apartment constructed within or as a detached accessory structure. And then we further clarified, not attached to a single-family dwelling. So it's very clear what we're meaning there. Enforcement is the same, monitoring is the same. So then we get to the note. The overall consensus, well, first of all, I should mention that the reason for being, a lot of the doing on this, the reason for being, is that we wish to make it a simpler process for those who wanted to put in an accessory apartment. And so the consensus of the working group is that, well, if you truly wish this to happen, it should be handled by one board, either the zoning board of appeals or the planning board, instead of, as it is currently, split. The planning board hears it for in a house, already existing house. The zoning board hears it for a separate building. And so,
Except that when you add on to an existing dwelling, just like I had one today, it's pre-existing non-conforming with a setback. So even though it's a by right bylaw, they're still gonna have to come to the ZBA because it's pre-existing non-conforming.
Exactly. So, and there are a number of things, the setbacks is the big one, but there may be other non-conforming issues that
Lot
you have to go to the
Lot coverage
ZBA.
is a bigger one.
Would that mean that if the, whatever board it was, it's probably have to have two separate hearings? It wouldn't be one combined hearing for the special permit?
But if it's a
In the plan
pre-existing
approval.
non-conforming structure, yes, there will be 2 hearings. Because they have to come to you no matter what, yeah.
So that the possibility of this is that it could be streamlined because they'd go in front of one board one time.
I don't know, that would be if the zoning board of appeals could hear the special permit, and they could encourage that by, let's say, the administrator saying, well, we think this is not a problem, and so you go ahead with your plans, and maybe we can hear everything on the same night. I don't think that's a good idea.
Well, we can't until you guys get done with site plan review. The ZBA never makes a determination prior to a resolution of a site plan review.
But if we had it or they had it, I think we're saying.
But your process for lot coverage is pretty extensive. You know, the people have to
Only when
present-
it deals with bulk, Jim, when they're going up, like what you're seeing happen in the Falmouth Heights area,
Right.
you take a ranch that's on a corner on a 4,000 square foot lot and you build.
Correct.
So the bylaw under 24069E requires the board to consider bulk and lot coverage. So that's when that comes into play. When you take something that's totally out of character, you can look down Walker Street. And we have to address the bulk issue. And sometimes it is an issue, not only with the board, but with neighbors. So when you're taking a 18-foot tall ranch and taking it up to 34.9 feet, and it's on a corner lot that happens to be 4,500 square feet, which a lot of those are, there is an issue. Not only it's with the neighbors, and so, you know, things like that. And this bylaw is gonna allow people to raise a ranch and create an accessory apartment on the second level with an outdoor stairway. So bulk will come into consideration under 24690 of the zoning bylaw. It's what the
It
board
already
does.
does now, though, right? That's already your job, though. Whether they're making an accessory apartment or just added an extra bedroom, it's the same
Correct,
thing.
but it's not any more of a lengthy, because I help the people get through it. I even do the bulk calculations for quite a few of them that don't have representation. The board doesn't like it when I do that, but I do it.
I like it, because I know you're
No,
accurate.
you like everything.
No, it's true. Ask
No, you don't.
Virginia.
You know,
So, I don't think it's any more lengthy, just because it's an accessory apartment. It's the bulk criteria that the board has to follow underneath the zoning bylaw.
I would rather not think that either of our boards has dug our feet in, and this is the way we want it. So to help the discussion process along, it occurred to me that I've been taught since I was quite young, that when there was a decision that you need to make, you do the pluses and minuses. So I think that might help us if, since we're meeting together, we've got the professionals here, we've got other people who've taken part in this, if we can do a chart, what are the pluses and minuses? The pluses of sending everything over to the zoning board, the pluses of sending everything over to the planning board, and what are the negatives of doing that? I don't know whether you agree or not. I mean, I can think, okay, let's say if the zoning board has absolutely everything to do with this, the planning board currently is the site plan and design review committee. We would have to put something else in here that says, and you can see, there's a note here, we'd have to change that section 5A, to give the zoning board the site plan and design review responsibility for this one issue only. Is that a negative, is it a positive? Well, it might be a negative because it's given to the planning board. It might be confusing to people. That, well, if you did it in this instance, why can't you do it here? Why should we go to both boards? Because you said you wait for it, okay? So that could be the negative. The positive could be that, well, then it's all under one board to make that decision. And so you're streamlining it, making it easier. So this is the yin-yang.
Okay, but let me explain to you that if you do the yin-yang, and some of these, you know, we have a big percentage of Falmouth that's pre-existing non-conforming, which we all know. Although some of those, like in Hatchville, North Falmouth, West Falmouth, may not be pre-existing non-conforming. Therefore, it would definitely be a by right through the planning board, site plan review and design build. However, if it is pre-existing non-conforming, you've got to change several bylaws or create this bylaw to cover 240-3C, 240-69E, 240-70. There's quite a few that you may have to look at that create this pre-existing non-conformity on this lot. How much of the bylaw do you want to change before you approve this? And if it's a by right on a pre-existing non-conforming, this is something that the ZBA has done for several years under 240-23I, 240-38I for a number of years. We have taken into consideration, does it maintain the appearance of a single-family dwelling? Different things like that. But just for discussion purposes, you've got to include other bylaws in this. The 243C is pre-existing non-conforming, 240-69E is lot coverage, bulk calculations, 240-70 is height. We have several houses that are over the 35-foot height, which makes them pre-existing non-conforming. So, plus the 243A that has, excuse me, an already existing cottage that didn't meet the criteria that it was existed prior to May 19, 1959. Therefore, it's an accessory structure that has a dwelling unit in it that is not acknowledged by the town to be pre-existing, it's non-complying. Now they want to convert that. Again, that's 243A. So there's several bylaws that you might have to take into consideration as to the planning board overseeing a special permit for a pre-existing non-conforming unit.
Are these all zoning bylaws that have to be changed so they need a 2/3 vote at town meeting?
Yes, and I'm just saying that you could probably do it all in one if you want the planning board to do that, but it's going to be an extensive workout.
That might be a minus for town meeting to get the hands around it.
There's just so many different things that play into it. And I think that's why this board has always said, why, you know, if it's pre-existing non-conforming, it's in the bylaw, it comes to the ZBA. If it's not, it's a by right anyway, it goes to the planning board for site plan review and design review. And any detached structure, again, on a pre-existing non-conforming, and this bylaw is clear that the detached comes for a special permit. So those are just things that I ask you to think about before you make a determination, because you're going to be changing more than one bylaw possibly, or creating a bylaw more extensive than this one.
If we just say, look at if it's pre-existing non-conforming, whatever, not the use of the accessory apartment, but any change to the structure, it has to go to you guys anyway. That's the way it is now, just keep it that way.
Right, but I'm saying for the discussion of who it actually goes to if the planning board wants to take over the special permit, which is, I believe, something that you guys have discussed extensively, then those are things that I ask you to consider.
There is the option, which, as I presented, it was an either or because of the desire to streamline it for the applicant. There is the option of keeping it exactly as it is.
Some just flew by me, sorry.
Yeah, I know, it is flying around in here.
I know this discussion, I think, would drive town meeting batty.
Oh, it would. We have to have decided already before anything happens.
Well, no, just to explain, I guess that would be a negative in my mind.
Yeah,
You know.
it would. Mhm. The things that we've gone over so far are just, they're almost like no-brainers.
Administrivia.
Yeah. Yeah.
what concerns me is, when you have a pre-existing non-conforming structure, my prior life in another planning board, you couldn't make that more non-conforming. You could not make a pre-existing non-conforming structure more non-conforming.
You can't.
So.
But nonconformity means a setback. You can't become more nonconforming in the setback. We have bylaws for our lot coverage. Lot coverage is 20% maximum in a residential district. It's
Right.
others and different ones. So if you want to increase that from 20 to 25%, in 2008, I believe it is, town meeting voted, the planning board used to vote that. They sent it back to the ZBA by a town meeting vote. So now we oversee the increase of 20 to 25%. Height, as long as you don't go over the existing height, if it's 38 feet, where our maximum is 35 feet, there's just certain things, as you guys know, because you deal with some of this, you just can't become more non-conforming. Meaning if your setback is 15 feet and it's required at 25 feet, you do an addition, this board likes to see you set it back and make it less non-conforming.
Exactly.
And with a raise and reconstruct comes to us, if it's non-conforming with setbacks and lot coverage, we like to see, I tell anybody that comes in, make it less non-conforming, it's more palatable to the board. And quite frankly, they don't have to, but this board likes it. And they do. There is a capability. I mean, I've even helped with design standards to help them come down and be less non-conforming.
I guess my question is, I was not aware that there were so many structures in town that were pre-existing non-conforming.
It's the properties and the structures that are non-conforming.
Yeah, the zoning change, everything's acre zoning now. I mean, that's why we don't have enough housing, is because we have zoned ourselves out of it. We've created the need to put 40,000 square foot lots, and you just can't have multiple, that's why the math doesn't work.
Right.
And that's why both the 40B and this accessory apartment is finding ways to soften the effect of what we did to ourselves with some of the zoning laws that we have.
Right. Lot coverage in 2002 was 35% maximum. In 2002, town meeting voted to reduce it to 20%, which is why they gave that caveat of 24069E to increase it by special permit up to 25%.
But if you do something within the dwelling itself,
Doesn't matter.
It's not us.
Not
it's
an
not
issue.
an issue.
Not an
It's
issue. This
it's
is,
building permits
This is
primarily.
only
Yeah,
if you're
it's a
gonna
building
do
permit.
an accessory building.
or an addition on a house that's not conforming.
Or
If you're
an
gonna-
accessory apartment, because you're creating a second unit. Even if you create that accessory apartment within the existing footprint, it still requires approval, either, something like that would be just the planning board under site plan review and design review.
So that's where it gets a little confusing, I think, to folks if,
Well, that's because you're adding a second dwelling unit, even though it's accessory to the primary, you're still increasing the number of units on that lot.
no, I'm talking about within the existing unit, no accessory building.
Okay?
Within the existing unit, where you're not increasing your setback, your sideline,
Right.
or anything like that. That
That's a
doesn't,
by right with a design review and site plan review through the planning board.
But if you go up high, they go higher?
If they go higher, as long as they
That's
don't,
different.
and
Okay.
I'm sure Rod would agree, as long as it's created within and the height doesn't exceed the 35, it's still the planning board, not us.
and that's where I think it's gonna become a little convoluted between the two boards.
Why is that?
If one board was to take on the entirety of the accessory apartment bylaw.
If it's created within, you're not changing the footprint, you're not exceeding the 35-foot maximum. Any interior changes is normally just a building permit,
Right.
even if they're pre-existing non-conforming.
Right, nothing,
But because of this bylaw and you're adding another unit, it would go to you guys strictly as a plan review, design review.
You'd still have to meet all the same requirements.
no, yeah, I got it.
John, you had a question.
I just wanted to say that I was elected to the planning board toward the tail end of this bylaw being drafted. And It's a new bylaw. I've served on both boards, and I think both boards are very skilled and talented and able to handle these special permits. But I would like to see, since it's a new bylaw, I would like to see it stay the way it is for the applicant. We're trying to make it less expensive for the applicant in some cases, not have to hire an engineer or an attorney to present a case to the planning board. I would like to see it stay the way it is for 5 years as a trial period. We've only had, what, 8 applicants or so. I really would like to see it, have this part of it stay the way it is for 5 years. The ZBA is very skilled at this, and they could handle every bit of it. And the planning board is very skilled to handle the part that is in this document. I would like to see a 5-year trial period. And after that, if it needs to be adjusted, it needs to be adjusted. That's how I feel about it.
You know, John, there's another good reason for that too, because the other changes that we've brought in here to simplify the understanding,
That should go through town meeting fairly readily. But this change with the boards, if we were going to do it one board or the other, may not. Because part of what they felt secure about here, I think, is the way we structured it between the two boards.
I have to admit to something, I was one of the ones that put that language in there, and I did it to get the zoning board to go along with us by giving them a piece of it. It was just an idea to try to work together, and I didn't realize it was gonna create so much of an issue.
See what you get.
That's what you get. But that was a compromise done from reach-out sessions and listening to people and whatnot, and I remember putting that language in, and I can't believe we were arguing about it, not arguing, but that seems to be, I wish I didn't put it in, I wish I left it all in one.
Unintended consequence.
Yeah,
Do we have consensus, maybe, to take
I
it
don't
up?
think, well,
Not quite?
we don't
Go
even
back
know
to the
what
committee?
exactly what, we're talking about, which, are we going to have one board review the whole thing?
It's the working group that will come up with the final review for these
Okay.
changes, because we put more changes in, remember?
Yeah, so you're gonna take it back to
And that
the work,
seemed to be acceptable here, so I think we need to have
take it back.
one more meeting of the temporary working group. But what I'm also sensing, true or not, and I'd like to see this, how do people here, the ones present, feel about leaving the procedures portion of it as it is?
You have to explain that.
Okay. Okay, procedures. A, accessory apartment constructed within a single-family dwelling or accessory structure attached thereto. So you've got maybe a sunroom that is attached by a breezeway, and it's attached. Okay. Prior to the issuance of a building permit for an accessory apartment constructed within a single-family dwelling or accessory structure attached thereto, a site plan review, and in parentheses, design review, pursuant, excuse me, to Article 39 of the zoning bylaw, shall be conducted by the planning board, taking into account the design standards, requirements, and purposes of this accessory apartment bylaw. The application for site plan review shall include the information contained in section 240-195C, unless waived by the planning board. So that says the planning board. Three?
I'm confused by that first sentence. Accessory apartment constructed within a single-family dwelling or accessory structure attached thereto, an existing
Maybe we
structure
should put in existing.
and existing attached.
Within
Then there's no change like we talked about a minute ago. It's already existing and being done within.
Okay, so on that first line, we want to put in accessory apartment constructed within an existing single-family dwelling or accessories.
Or existing accessories, yes,
Okay,
attached thereto, please.
But what about people are building a new home? How would this affect that? And they want to add an accessory apartment?
If they're creating it within and they meet all the dimensional requirements, which they should anyway for
They
a
should,
new
yeah.
structure, then it
So-
would definitely just be
So
the
it still
planning
fit
board.
within your language, okay.
right, it would be planning board approval in this case.
Okay.
Because any
Okay.
new structure has to meet dimensional requirements.
Right.
A raise and reconstruct, that's a different story, but a new dwelling.
Then we go to B. Accessory apartment constructed within or as a detached accessory structure, not attached to a single family dwelling. So it's either within or as a detached. In other words, you're building a new structure, or it is within a
An
barn or a
existing,
garage.
an existing detached. Constructed within an existing or as a detached.
Okay. Okay, but do we want to have that existing also? Or as an existing detached?
Well, the accessory apartment constructed within an existing detached accessory structure, or a new constructed detached. I think it's got to be specified within an existing.
Or within a new detached?
Mhm. That gets both of them.
Okay. So then it would read, accessory apartment constructed within an existing, or within a new accessory structure. So you're right, that captures both. Not attached, and this clarifies it further, not attached to a single-family dwelling. In addition to the site plan review requirements above, an accessory apartment built within or as an accessory structure, not attached to a single-family dwelling, a special permit from the Board of Appeals shall be required. In addition to the design standards, requirements, and purposes of this accessory apartment bylaw, the Board of Appeals shall take into account the standards found in section 240-216A.
Through I.
One, I or one?
Through I.
I, okay,
A through
of this
I.
bylaw. I didn't look that up, sorry. So, you got it.
That's
as
very
is?
confusing.
I know, it's good.
Well,
we're
those are
gonna-
the design standards that the ZBA has to follow to approve any special permit, the 240-216,
No,
A through I.
that's not what I mean. What's confusing is, we have A, constructed within a single-family dwelling or an existing accessory structure attached. So that's all attached, it's not
It's existing.
detached.
It's existing.
But then you say accessory apartment constructed within
A
an
detached,
existing
detached.
or as, so the or shouldn't be in there. Existing detached accessory structure, because you can't have both, right? You have accessory apartment constructed within
An existing
an
detached.
existing,
Detached, or a new detached, I believe is what Pat was
Right.
saying.
That's how, it has to be
Right.
expanded to make it clear.
yeah, it has to be clarified.
Right,
Because
and I
that's
think
very
that's the language
confusing
you
when you
just said.
go to A to B. It's very, very confusing.
So I'm putting a note for the working group, reword that one. Okay, does that make sense?
Yes.
And so then what John says is, let's just keep it as it is for a period of 5 years as far as responsibilities, and see if there are any problems or how it's working. Is there a consensus of the people here tonight to do that?
Yeah.
I think it's a good idea.
Okay,
Fine, but
bingo.
Works for me.
Mr. Fox?
I'm gonna, that, whatever my board wants to do, that we're gonna do. I'm fine with that, if that's what they want. I can leave it the way it is, I'm fine with that.
Okay, and it's working sort of so far, we think. And so it's been simplified by the wording, and hopefully the whole thing will be better.
I think the way that you've reworded it, especially the design part of it,
Mhm.
is very helpful to the public, very
Mhm.
helpful.
And I think if people understand that they may have to go between two boards, and it's all spelled out in whatever pamphlet we create, you know, A, B, C, and then you have an arrow going across to where you go. It's just like if someone was coming in and wanted to build anything in town, and you want to have sort of a one-stop shop where you know you go to this department, the next department, the next department.
Well, I will tell you, and I tell everybody that comes before, or comes into my office, and I've explained this to John, because he's a builder. You apply to the planning board, then you turn around and apply to the ZBA. You give us the date that you're in front of the planning board, we take into consideration that it may be 2 meetings, and we schedule it, so you're not strung out for an extra couple of months. And that's what I've always done with applications that go through site plan review. Any of your commercial projects, any of the multifamily dwellings that require site plan review, they submit their application to you and then turn around and submit to us. If it goes over the 65-day, which is under Mass General laws, I have to hold a hearing within 65 days, and we see a problem with the planning board, we ask for a continuation and a waiver. That way, the person's not held up, they apply to the planning board, and then would wait till the site plan review is done, and then they apply to the ZBA. That lengthens the whole process. This way, they apply to both boards, we pay attention, we keep in touch with the applicant. When they're done, we hold meetings.
And John, you?
I just want to make sure I understand the process from this point forward. So we have an existing accessory apartment bylaw, and we're going to propose to amend it.
Correct.
So if the amendment doesn't pass, will it be a line item amendment, or just an amendment? And if it doesn't pass, does that mean the accessory apartment bylaw is out completely?
No.
So it stays intact the
Correct.
way it is already approved?
Correct.
Okay,
Okay.
just wanted to make sure I understood
And
So
that.
we're not gonna lose it by getting
That's
caught
fine.
up in wording.
But does it have to be line by line, or can it be?
No, I hope not.
Yeah, I hope not.
I think the best way to do this is to just put the new one in.
That's essentially why I did what I did, how I did it. And then changes in wording can be put in italics or however they do it for.
And the intent, your intent that'll show on the warrant will be
Simplify,
wordsmithing and
simplify
cleaning
and
up.
clarify.
And I think at town meeting, if both boards speak in favor of the whole thing, it'll go through smoothly.
we're
But if we have 2 different presentations in different directions, it'll go down.
Yeah, we don't want to relive what happened. We don't. That's why.
That's why we're here tonight.
Exactly, this is a
I
good
was,
thing.
I was just going to suggest that before town meeting, that the boards, as well as the Board of Health, I mean, I think we have to start working more as integrated system rather than our separate little fiefdoms, that we work together and we go to town meeting, we go as a consolidated, in agreement, so that the Board of Health can get up and they can say, we've gone through this, the waterways, that all the boards that are involved in this come to consensus and bring the consensus to town meeting.
That works when we do joint meetings.
The more, the better.
You want to cast a wide net to include the Affordable Housing Committee? There may be 2 or 3 other committees that you may want to include.
We're okay with
You're,
these
you're
people.
preaching to the
Yeah.
choir, because that's how I believe town meetings should work.
So are we all good here that, Julian, we need one more meeting of the working group to wordsmith, and I'd love some attempts for wordsmithing the confusing part of this, as was brought out. You've got that, don't you, Tom?
Yeah, if I may, I'll be working with Sari to make sure that we're comfortable with what we talked about and run it by you folks before, and with the working group.
Okay.
Because I'm writing furiously and making notes. Watch the tape at 7:29 and try to capture that again. So we'll make sure that when we get back to our working group, that we've got the latest version of this draft that was recommended from this meeting to bring to that group.
Okay, now, the stricture here is when this needs to be submitted for town meeting as an article.
Sure.
Oops, August 31st, I
It
think.
closes on August 31st.
30 days.
So we don't have a big time frame in there.
I think the biggest thing is the Board of Health agreement or consensus before you guys finalize things, right?
Well, there was that little bracket that I put in there, omit, question mark.
Yeah, that's
And that
true.
Probably
I'm hoping
needs
it
to
just
work
says
for
to the Board of
now.
Health's
Yeah, Yeah.
satisfaction. Get it, let them deal with it, not us.
Water Quality Committee should weigh in one way or the other.
they're not, well,
Well,
I
that's
know they're not
already-
That's up to
regular.
the Board of Health to reach out to them and
Right.
deal with that issue.
Why? It's
because we don't want to convolute things anymore.
Well, we just
This
talked
is-
about a big tent. I hate to
We
use that word.
agreed with
Wait
this.
a minute, I'd like to finish.
Oh, sorry, Jerry.
We're
Aren't you
talking
used to
about
that?
a big tent. Water Quality Committee is driving nitrogen and improving the estuaries. This was put in as an attempt to try to keep the estuaries from not getting any worse, you know, to control it. So I think it would be important for the water quality, I mean, if the Water Quality Committee doesn't buy into without enhanced nitrogen, we're gonna have a battle on town meeting floor. And half the people won't understand what we're discussing.
I
Well, we've
think
got
the intent
Virginia sitting
originally
here
was
listening.
to get those key areas that Virginia
Right.
brought to the board, to get them included as a coastal pond overlay, and I believe that's going forward, right?
Please, Virginia.
Virginia Valiela. So John Julie asked about process, and I thought that was a very good question with regard to this bylaw. But there's another piece of this process that has been touched on by this temporary working group, and that Pat and I and Tom Bott have been working on in particular. And it was the objection that was originally raised by the Water Quality Committee that although this bylaw references the coastal pond overlay district, it was missing 4 of the districts on the map that this bylaw is quoting. And so that needs to be corrected. So we are working on that process, and I think at the next temporary meeting that we have, meeting of the temporary group, we should go over what we've learned in terms of where the original map came from. It clearly needs to be corrected, and it is correctable with the GIS that we have. The data comes directly from the studies that were done for the estuaries. The database is located at the Cape Cod Commission. And this is a process that is resolvable, but it will be a separate article. So you will be voting on the map that is corrected.
So that could be existing overlays that may be incorrect, in addition to the new overlays.
In addition to the overlays that we're missing.
Okay, so you're not gonna try to,
There will be both correction of
Okay.
the estuaries, and the missing estuaries will be added. So that you're voting all of the impaired watersheds
In
for
this
the
bylaw.
town. Thank you.
And that language, the coastal pond overlay districts will incorporate what she's talking
Yeah.
about.
Right.
She's talking about.
sounds good.
Are we good?
Yes.
I have a question. Is this-
Wait a minute.
Paul,
Wait a minute.
didn't hear, we
Paul's
just
got the
recognized
floor.
Paul, just 1 second.
I was just going to say, the working group has spent an enormous amount of time on this issue, and the planning board spent a lot of time too, and I am really impressed with the collaborative effort tonight on trying to get this worked out. The whole intent is to streamline this process to make it easier for people to consider accessory apartments. The input from the Board of Health is going to be certainly important, but I think it's been a good effort tonight, and I'm trying to pull this together ahead of time, so for what it's worth, I mentioned it.
Thank you. Ed?
You know, why does the bylaw allow a maximum of 800 square feet, or 40% of the principal structure, to house people, but it's 900 square feet, or 50%, to house a car? It seemed to me that the people ought to be more important than the car. And I'd say, why isn't it 900? And I know that's probably a big thing to throw in at the last minute, but, you know, to me, it's a legitimate question. And I mean, I like taking care of my cars, but, you know, I think we should think about that.
He's speaking of the bylaws in residential and agricultural, where if you have more than 900 square feet of garage space, you have to get a special permit for additional. That's what he's speaking of, in comparison to this.
And especially where I was brought up where we should measure baseboard to baseboard, not the outside of the house, or have the space. And if you have an 800 square foot as a maximum, and you're gonna measure it on the outside, you know, somebody wanted to put 6-inch studs and make it energy efficient, but they're gonna lose space on the side.
The reason why we did that, Ed, is particularly to keep the architectural effect. We have a lot of homes that are around 900 square feet, and, you know, we wanted to look like it's an accessory to the building, and not a duplex. And if it starts to get bigger, that's where the pushback of that size was. That was an architectural effect reason for that size limitation. And there's a lot of apartments and stuff that rents that are 600 and 700 square feet, and they work. And that's why, in my experience, I'm in houses all day long, and a lot of apartments, and it works. It actually works to have a small 600 to 700 or 800 square foot little 2-bedroom, and it fits in the neighborhood, and that's really where it came from. We're afraid if we let it get too big, or if the number got to be, the biggest thing we're fighting is not to have them look like, another home on the site.
Yeah, I know
And
where you're
that's,
coming
and then
from.
as it gets bigger, you start to get over that line real quickly.
Pat? One of the other issues was from the Affordable Housing Committee perspective. If you have an 800 square foot dwelling unit, because of its size, you sort of cap the rent. And if we're looking for either a single police officer or a teacher or a young couple to be able to afford something in an accessory apartment, the larger it gets, the higher the rent. And the Affordable Housing Committee has been, working really hard to try to provide housing in some way for those people who work here but can't afford to live here unless we have things like affordable housing and these units within another dwelling. So I think these 800 square feet makes, perfect sense. And for all the reasons Jim said, in addition to the need for affordable housing in town.
I just thought it was,
Interesting.
it was a good example, because I like my cars clean and I like to work on it.
Well, you can always cut down on the square foot of a garage that's allowed.
Change that. And I'll remind you that these apartments right here, 450 square feet.
Yep.
Does that complete our agenda for this evening?
One question. Could all members of both boards get whatever you two finally agree on, so we know what's going in front of the special committee?
Sure.
I
We
mean,
get it all the
particip-
time, yeah.
Of course.
That's what we do.
Those drafts will
I
get to you
actually came
before.
we get them emailed to us.
Well,
Yeah,
Didn't you?
yes.
But drafts that go to the subcommittee, at least the way you explain it,
The
I'm not
finalized-
supposed to get it.
The finalized ones will come to the board. It'll come to me and I disperse it to the board. as
The
well.
thing we discussed tonight, that's all I'm asking.
Give me the nod. Go ahead.
Just in closing, I want to thank the planning board for the joint meeting tonight. I think we're all on the same page. And the ZBA rep on the working group reported a lot of progress, and I think that's evident tonight. So hopefully we'll have a finished product within the month for town meeting.
Okay, we're adjourned.
Thank you.
Okay, so moved. Done.